The 911 operator picked up on something almost immediately. Not what the caller said. It was the spaces between the words, the way her voice rose and fell in patterns that didn't quite match what she was describing. The caller said she was terrified. She said armed men had broken into her home, shot both of her parents, and tied her to the staircase banister. She said she didn't know if her mother was breathing. She said she didn't know anything. She said she was scared. But the voice didn't sound scared. It sounded practiced. It was November 8th, 2010. The call came in just before midnight from a quiet residential street in Markham, Ontario, a suburb north of Toronto where the houses were large, the streets were clean, and nothing like this had ever happened before. Police and paramedics arrived within minutes. What they found looked exactly like a home invasion gone wrong. The front door was unlocked. A woman was dead on the main floor, shot multiple times. A man was alive but barely, gravely wounded, blood pooling beneath him. And upstairs, bound loosely to the staircase banister with a shoelace, was a 24-year-old woman named Jennifer Pan. She told officers she had been watching television in her room when she heard men downstairs. She said they came up, tied her hands behind her back, led her to the banister, and left her there while they went back down to her parents. She said she heard gunshots. She said she screamed. She said she called 911 the moment she could reach her phone. Every part of that story was a lie. And it would take investigators months to understand just how deep the lies went. Not just the lies about that night. The lies that had been quietly building for nearly a decade before the gun ever went off. To understand what happened on November 8th, you have to understand who Jennifer Pan was. Or, more precisely, who Jennifer Pan pretended to be. She was born in 1986 in Scarborough, Ontario, the daughter of Hue Han Pan and Bich Ha Pan, Vietnamese immigrants who had arrived in Canada in the late 1970s with almost nothing and built a life through relentless, unglamorous work. Han spent decades on factory floors. Bish worked long shifts and managed the household. They saved carefully and eventually bought a house in Markham, a real house, in a good neighborhood, with a driveway and a garden and a life that represented everything they had crossed an ocean to find. Into that house, they poured every remaining ambition directly into their children. Jennifer was enrolled in piano lessons before she was old enough to have strong opinions about it. She was enrolled in figure skating. She was told from an early age that grades were not something you negotiated, they were something you delivered. Han had a specific vision for his daughter. He wanted her to become a pharmacist, not a general practitioner, a pharmacist. It was a respectable profession, stable income, a point of pride in the community. Jennifer would study hard, go to university, graduate, and become the thing her father had decided she would become. By every outward measure, it was working. Jennifer won piano competitions. She performed at recitals. She brought home strong grades. She smiled in photographs. She was the daughter that other parents in the neighborhood quietly envied. But underneath all of it, something had already started to come loose. In 11th grade, Jennifer met a boy named Daniel Wong. He was a year older, Chinese-Canadian, and by every measure that Han Pan cared about, the wrong kind of person. Daniel wasn't a pharmacist in training. He wasn't on a pre-med track. He managed a pizza restaurant and sold marijuana on the side. He was, by the standards of Jennifer's household, a dead end. Jennifer didn't care. She fell hard, and that was the beginning of everything. By the time Jennifer was in her senior year of high school, her grades had started to slip. Not catastrophically at first, just enough to matter. She had been accepted early to Ryerson University, but then she failed a required calculus course, and the acceptance was withdrawn. She said nothing to her parents. She couldn't. The calculus failure would have been the first crack in the image she had been asked to maintain her entire life, and she wasn't willing to let that image break, so she didn't. She forged her report card instead. That first forgery was a small thing, a single grade on a single document. But it opened a door that Jennifer would spend the next several years walking deeper and deeper through. She told her parents she was starting at Ryerson in the fall. She told them she had received a scholarship. Her father, proud and relieved, bought her a laptop. He began driving her to the campus in the mornings. Jennifer wasn't going to class, she was going to coffee shops. She was going to Daniel's apartment. She was sitting in libraries and cafes with notebooks open in front of her, filling them with fake class notes about subjects she wasn't studying, at a school she wasn't attending, in a program she had never enrolled in. This continued for 4 years. 4 years. She invented professors, she invented assignments, she fabricated transcripts. She told her parents she had transferred from Ryerson to the University of Toronto. She told them she was volunteering at a hospital, shadowing pharmacists, building her application for graduate study. While they believed she was in class, she was with Daniel. While they believed she was volunteering, she was with Daniel. While they believed their daughter was building the life they had designed for her, she was living an entirely different one, structured entirely around a relationship they had told her she couldn't have. The psychological cost of maintaining that double life for that long is something investigators would later try to understand. It required near constant monitoring of details. It required remembering which lie went where, who knew what she had told her parents versus what she had told her friends. It required performing the version of herself that her parents expected every single time she walked through the front door. Performing it at dinner. Performing it when her father asked how her studies were going. Performing it when her mother asked what her professors were like. For 4 years, she never slipped. But the life outside the performance was falling apart. Daniel had grown frustrated. By 2009, the relationship had become unsustainable. The secrecy, the restrictions, the way Jennifer's entire existence had to be built around what her parents couldn't know. It was exhausting. Daniel ended the relationship and started seeing someone else. Jennifer did not take it well. She told Daniel that a man had broken into her home and attacked her. She fabricated an assault. She told him the attack had been arranged by his new girlfriend, that she was being targeted. The story was elaborate and specific and completely untrue. She manufactured a crisis to pull him back to her. It worked, temporarily, but the relationship remained unstable, cycling in and out of connection and distance. Then her parents found out. The exact details of how the lie finally collapsed vary depending on the source, but by 2010, Han and Bitch Pan had discovered that their daughter had not graduated from high school, had never attended a day of university, and had been maintaining a relationship with a man they had explicitly forbidden her from seeing. The reaction was devastating. Han was furious in a way that went beyond disappointment. He took away her phone. He took away her laptop. He imposed new rules. She was not allowed to leave the house without supervision. She was not allowed to contact Daniel. He told her directly, "If you want to be with that man, you will have to wait until I am dead." Those words stayed with Jennifer. According to investigators, it was around this time that Jennifer began asking people to help her kill her father. The first attempt never happened. She connected through a mutual friend with a man named Ricardo Duncan, who she allegedly offered $1,500 to murder her father in the parking lot of his workplace. Duncan refused and returned the money. The plan dissolved. But Jennifer didn't stop planning. By 2010, she and Daniel had reconnected. He had provided her with a secret phone, a way to communicate without her parents knowing. Through that phone, she told him what she wanted. Daniel connected her with a man named Lenford Crawford, who went by a name investigators would come to know well. Crawford visited the neighborhood on Halloween 2010 to scout the property. He mapped the exits. He looked at the cameras. He studied the rhythms of the house. On November 8th, he sent Jennifer a text, short, direct. "After work, okay, will be game time." That evening, Han went to bed early as he usually did. Jennifer walked downstairs, spoke briefly with her mother, Bitch, who had just returned from her weekly line dancing class. Then Jennifer said goodnight and unlocked the front door. 3 men entered the house: Crawford, David Milvaganam, and Eric Carty. They moved toward the basement. Jennifer went upstairs. The plan, as she had understood it, was for both of her parents to be killed. What she did not plan for, what no one planned for, was her father surviving. Han Pan was shot multiple times, including once in the face. He collapsed in the basement. By any reasonable expectation, he should not have survived. But he did. Gravely wounded, bleeding heavily, he somehow dragged himself up the basement stairs, out the back door and into the yard, where he called out for help until a neighbor heard him. Bich Hapan was not as fortunate. She had been shot multiple times and died at the scene. By the time police arrived, Jennifer was upstairs, loosely bound to the banister, phone in hand. The 911 call had already gone out. The scene was arranged. The story was ready. Investigators spent the first hours of that night treating it like a home invasion. They considered robbery as a motive. They considered drug connections. They pursued multiple angles simultaneously, as they are trained to do. Jennifer cooperated. She wept. She answered questions. She performed. But there were details that didn't hold. The first issue was the binding itself. Jennifer told police that one of the intruders had tied her hands behind her back, but the shoelace around her wrists was loose. Officers noted it almost immediately. And more importantly, if her hands had been bound behind her back, how had she reached her phone to call 911? During a follow-up interview 2 days later, investigators asked her to demonstrate, to show them physically how she had maneuvered her bound hands to her phone in the position she described. She couldn't. The demonstration didn't work. The mechanics of it didn't hold together under scrutiny. And that was the thread they began to pull. What investigators found when they pulled it was staggering in its detail. Han Pan had woken from his coma. He was blind from his injuries. The shooting had left him permanently without sight, but his memory was intact. And what he remembered contradicted his daughter's account in a way that could not be explained away. He told detectives that while he was in the basement, bound and wounded, he had seen Jennifer speaking with one of the attackers. Not screaming, not pleading, not struggling. Calmly, softly, in the manner of someone who knew who she was talking to. Investigators examined Jennifer's phones, both of them. The primary one her parents knew about, and the secondary one that Daniel had provided. The text message records were extensive. Months of communication between Jennifer and Daniel, between Jennifer and Crawford, coordinating dates and timing and payment. She had promised the men $10,000 out of her expected inheritance. She had made a partial payment. The texts discussed logistics. They discussed the house. They discussed her parents' routines. They discussed which night. They discussed what to do if something went wrong. Nothing in those messages looked like panic. Nothing looked like a person who was spiraling out of control and making impulsive decisions under extreme emotional pressure. The communication was structured. It was organized. It reflected planning that had taken place over weeks and months, not hours. The investigators who reviewed it later described it as some of the most methodical pre-crime communication they had encountered. The interrogations stretched across multiple sessions and more than 10 hours of recorded footage. Detective William Gutz led the questioning. His approach was methodical and unhurried. He never raised his voice. He sat across from Jennifer in a small room and spoke to her the way a person speaks to someone they are trying to understand, not to catch. He asked her questions about her life, about her parents, about Daniel, about what things had been like in the house in the months before November 8th. He was building something, and Jennifer couldn't see it being built. In Canada, investigators are legally permitted to lie to suspects about the evidence they possess. It is a technique with specific strategic applications, and Gutz used it carefully. He told Jennifer that police had satellite technology with infrared imaging capability that could reconstruct movements inside buildings. He told her they had software that analyzed deception patterns in recorded statements, software that had already been running against everything she had said. Neither of those things existed. But Jennifer didn't know that. She had spent the days since the shooting believing that her performance had held, that the bound wrists and the 911 call and the tears had done their job. And then Gertz laid out, piece by piece, an evidence picture that suggested the opposite. He told her what the satellites had supposedly seen. He told her what the software had supposedly flagged. He told her that her father had woken up. That last part was true. Under the weight of a father who had survived and a technology she believed was omniscient, Jennifer Pan began to crack. Not all at once. The confession came in stages, each one carefully navigated by Gertz, who understood that pushing too hard at the wrong moment would close her down completely. He told her she was a good person who had made a terrible mistake. He told her that he understood the pressure she had been under. He said the word pressure in a way that invited her to explain exactly what that pressure had felt like. She took the invitation. Her account of what happened shifted, then shifted again, then collapsed entirely into something that resembled, though did not quite achieve, the truth. She admitted she had arranged the killing, but she offered an explanation that investigators found difficult to accept. She claimed the original plan had been for the men to kill her, not her parents. That she had arranged her own murder as a way out of the life she was trapped in, and that Crawford had changed the plan without telling her. That she was a victim of the very crime she had organized. The text messages did not support that version of events. Han's testimony did not support it. The timing and the logistics and the months of planning did not support it. But it was the version Jennifer gave, and she held parts of it through the trial. The physical evidence, the text messages, and Han's testimony told a different story. Jennifer Pan, Daniel Wong, Lenford Crawford, and David Milvaganam were convicted of first-degree murder in the death of Bich Ha Pan and attempted murder in the case of Han Pan. All four were sentenced to life in prison with no possibility of parole for 25 years. A fifth co-conspirator, Eric Carty, was convicted of conspiracy and sentenced separately. He died in custody in 2018. Han Pan testified against his own daughter at trial. He was blind by then. He sat in the courtroom that his taxes had funded, in the country he had come to with nothing and built into something, and told a jury what he had seen in that basement on the night his wife was killed, and his eyes were destroyed by a bullet paid for by his daughter. He answered every question that was put to him. After the conviction, Han and Jennifer's brother Felix obtained restraining orders preventing Jennifer from contacting either of them. Jennifer Pan's parents had dreamed of giving her everything. They had wanted her to be a pharmacist. They had bought her a laptop and driven her to a campus she never attended. They had worked their entire lives so that she wouldn't have to work as hard as they did. The life they built, the house they filled, the expectations they carried, all of it came back to that unlocked front door on a November night when Jennifer walked upstairs and waited. But there is something in this case that goes beyond the crime itself. Something that investigators, journalists, and the psychologists who studied the case have tried to name ever since. Jennifer Pan was not, by any reasonable measure, a person without options. She was not facing violence or abuse in the traditional sense. She had a roof over her head, food, clothing, a supportive structure, even if that structure had become suffocating. She had years in which she could have made different decisions. She could have told the truth about the calculus failure. She could have had the conversation about Daniel. She could have left. She chose instead to build a prison out of a lie and then decide that the only exit was through her parents. What the case revealed was not just the capacity for violence in an ordinary suburban household. It revealed something quieter and more difficult to look at directly. What happens when a person's entire identity becomes the performance of someone else's expectations, and the performance becomes the only self they know how to inhabit? Jennifer Pan didn't know who she was outside of the daughter her parents believed they had raised. She had been performing that person for so long that she had no framework for what came next if the performance ended. And so instead of ending the performance, she tried to eliminate the audience. That is the part of this case that lingers. Not the night itself, though the night was terrible. Not the 911 call, though the 911 call contained more information than Jennifer intended to give. Not even the interrogation room, though the interrogation room footage is some of the most watched and most studied material in Canadian true crime history. It's the years before. The notebooks filled with fake class notes. The laptop her father bought for a degree she was never earning. The mornings he drove her to a campus she never entered. The dinners where she described professors who didn't exist and classes she had never attended. The smile, the performance, the daily maintenance of a version of herself that had nothing to do with who she actually was. The investigators who worked the case have spoken about it publicly, and the phrase that comes up most often is not about the murder. It's about the lies, how long they went on, how complete they were, how Jennifer Pan looked her parents in the face night after night, year after year, and gave them the daughter they had asked for, even as the real person underneath that daughter was making plans that they would never have believed possible. Han Pan lost his wife. He lost his sight. He lost his daughter. He sat blind in a courtroom and testified against her anyway, because the truth was the only thing left that belonged to him. Jennifer Pan is in prison. She will be in her 50s before she is eligible for parole. Daniel Wong is in prison. Crawford and Milvaganam are in prison. The house in Markham still stands on that same quiet street. And somewhere in the record of that 911 call, in the careful rise and fall of a voice that didn't sound quite scared enough, was everything investigators needed. They just had to listen for what wasn't there.